Chapter 5, Secrets. Naruto-san, let us begin your training, Konan said as she sat up from her seated position wrapping her arm in a bandage. Somehow, she felt a smidge happier from their little heart-to-heart moment. Oh yeah. Naruto shouted giddily, that's what I was gonna ask you today. Konan questioned the blonde, befuddled, ask what? Well, before I found you, I wanted to find someone to help me with the Rinnegan. Then I thought after a minute and realized you were the only person that was even remotely close to knowing anything about it. But after all of those things that happened today, I sort of forgot, he replied, rubbing the back of his head wryly. Yes, well, we are here now, and we don't have much time to waste, Konan replied in a matter-of-fact tone. Madara far surpasses your strength, and even my own, but we are about to change that, she then finished wrapping her arm and started walking towards the door. The blonde only stared at her, his gaze deep in space signifying that he was in thought. Naruto-san, Madara is nothing but pure darkness. You, on the other hand, are the child of prophecy. It is said that you will triumph victoriously and make things right in this world gone awry. She then turned to face him in a serious facade. By the time we are done with your training, he will never get his hands on you. I can guarantee it. That response actually lightened his mood a little. A small grin edged across his face as he thought about that aspect. He was actually going to be taught how to use the Rinnegan. It sort of felt strange to him now that he thought about it. He has a Kekkei Genkai, a special eye that her friend once had. Now that friend is no more, which makes Naruto the new heir to the special power he now possesses. Okay, Konan-chan, I'm ready, Naruto replied cheerily. The blue-haired woman looked at him and her features dropped into a frown. Don't call me that. Huh? He asked a little confused. You are never to put Chan at the end of my name. Understand? She told him in an angry voice, just because we have to train together for your benefit, that does not mean that we are best friends. But I thought, well, you thought wrong, she replied with no hesitation. Now let's get going. We do not have much time, she then proceeded out of the door in sort of a hurry. Naruto tried to think as he couldn't figure out what just happened. What is wrong with her? 1 minute we're friendly, the next, she's staring daggers at me. I don't get it. He concentrated for another second or so, before he concluded that it would come to him sooner or later. Naruto then followed behind Konan to begin his very first training lesson of the Rinnegan. Another day as the Hokage unfurls, Tsunade replied out in the open at her office desk. It never ceases to amaze me. Tsunade was very annoyed as of late. She had just gotten out of a coma, and the work already piled itself to the ceiling, as if it was trying to get her mad on purpose. She had to deal with the unexpected arrival of a former Akatsuki member, which was proving to be more trouble than it was actually worth, but could potentially work into a huge advantage if handled correctly. She had to go through council, just to even instate Konan as a leaf ninja. But if the blue-haired woman was willing to help Naruto in any way she could, and Naruto felt it best, then there didn't seem to be any reason why she shouldn't do this for her, even if the Hokage didn't want to. It was the way Konan acted towards Tsunade that really tipped the scales in the ex-Akatsuki's favor. The goddamn could read people very well, that it was almost a talent, because she could pick up in subtle gesture or voice change very easily, just like the third Hokage. That was something that only interrogators were good at. Maybe she should have been a cross-examiner? Easier than being Hokage, she thought with a sigh. She then thought about the blue-haired woman that came in earlier. When she looked at Konan, the look in her eyes and the way she spoke, it was as if she was speaking to another person entirely, if that makes sense. Tsunade could see the loneliness in Konan's eyes, in which her voice didn't betray that emotion at all. Of course, Konan was trying to hide it, and doing a good job nonetheless, but that didn't really matter, because the Hokage could see straight through the mask that the paper user held onto for a false sense of comfort. Tsunade could see her sadness, oh too well. Konan was the last one from the trio that trained under Jiraiya all those years ago, and now that all of her friends were deceased, there was no one else there to help the paper user get over her grief. The Sennin felt a little sad for the woman, even though she helped in the village's total annihilation. But now that Naruto is around her in the village, maybe he will find a friend in Konan and help her. She seemed to hold Naruto in high regard. I think he's safe for now. While in the middle of her thoughts, Yamato and Kakashi appeared in the Godame's office with a poof of smoke, completely disrupting her ruminations. Tsunade looked over in their direction and put a knowing look upon her face. Well, what did you find out? She then intertwined her fingers and laid her elbows on the table, resting her chin on her hands. Right, Yamato replied firmly. Well, we were a little startled at first when we saw it, but the tests came back negative. His eyes are real. Yes, it seems Naruto has acquired the true Rinnegan, Kakashi stated seriously. We do not know what to do about the situation, although we do know that it does not have any effect on the last seal containing the Kyuubi. Well, at least there is some good news. Good to know Nagato didn't do anything to him, Sanada responded with a sense of finality. I found it very odd though, Kakashi started again after a minute silence. Naruto only has 2 rings on his eyes, but if I remember correctly, the Rinnegan has always covered the entire eye. I've done some research while we were fighting pain, and it says that the Rinnegan covers the whole eye, but Naruto's only goes so far as to cover the eyes. Sanada looked to the ninja intrigued by his findings. You do make an interesting point. That is why I would like to continue testing him for further evaluation, Yamato answered without a moment's haste. Things seem a little confusing. And for that reason, I want to make sure nothing happens. Sanada nodded her head in approval. Right. Do you have my permission to continue watching him for any unusual occurrences as it would deem unfortunate if something were to happen to Naruto? The Hokage sternly replied. Something was fishy as things did not definitely add up. What could it be? What was Nagato's purpose? Kakashi then let his eye wander until a hint of blue piqued his interest on the Hokage's desk. There was a folder that was left open revealing a sizable document and a photo of a person on top. Oh, doing a last-minute Akatsuki report? Kakashi's eye lingered a little longer between the front page and picture before noticing something out of the ordinary. Wait a minute. Is she? That's right, Kakashi, the Godame interrupted. She is a Leaf Jonin. What? Yamato asked before he looked at the photo with the silver-haired Jonin. All he heard was Akatsuki, she, and Leaf Jonin. He really wasn't expecting what he saw. You can't be serious? Sanada looked at the document as well, before heaving a soft sigh. Look, Naruto was the one who found her. He seemed to trust her, after finding out that Nagato was his cousin, and also, she has no ill will towards Naruto, because we had an Oichi look into her mind, and come up with nothing. Kakashi and Yamato stared in, though as the Sennin continued, I already know what you are thinking. When I first heard that Naruto brought her here, I thought the same thing. I really just wanted to leave here for dead, but Naruto, he had a sense that something was there that no one was seeing. That idiot. He thinks he knows everything. A smile graced her lips as she kept the speech moving. It wasn't until I actually saw her today that I changed my mind. Yamato felt the need to speak after a moment of silence, curious as to what the woman had to say. Well, what made you change your mind? Sanada looked at the picture again, and then looked at both of the Jonin with her smile fading into a sad one. Naruto did. His attitude about everything, maybe he felt obligated to protect Konan, since Pain, or Nagato rather, told him that he was his cousin. I do not know. Do you really wish the better for Naruto, don't you, Lady Tsunade? Kakashi asked in a semi-sorrowful voice, but his stature proved he was sympathetic as well. Yes, but I also know Thae Konan can really help him with his training. She's the only one that really knows anything about the Rinnegan, and plus, on top of that, she seems to trust Naruto to a degree. Sanada then moved her arms to the desk and turned her eyes to the table as well. What was real strange, though, was while we were in discussion about it with the Jonin leader and the council, Danzo didn't even raise an argument. Actually, he and I were the only ones in full support of the instatement. That only makes me curious as to what he was thinking. I see your point, Kakashi stated as he turned his head to the wood user. Yamato then nodded in acceptance. I guess we really can't disobey the Hokage's decree. Nope, Sanada replied cheekily, changing her mood in an instant, and that is one reason why I love being Hokage. Yamato was slightly taken aback before he nodded his head again. Yes, Lady Hokage, then I will keep you updated with Naruto. Goodbye. He then did a shunshin, leaving Kakashi and Sanada in the room alone. Once things died down, Kakashi looked at the Godame and turned his head to the door. Well, since you don't need me for anything, I might as well make my leave. Actually, Sanada started, I do need your assistance. That made the silver-haired Jonin stop in his tracks. Oh? Yes, I need you to keep an eye on Naruto and Konan for me, she replied, getting up from her chair, but wobbled just a bit after another faint spell washed over her. The coma's after effects were getting to her. So, you don't trust Konan after all, Kakashi replied in an aha tone. The slug summoner sighed in defeat. You're right. We can't fully trust her. Not just yet anyway. She was an Akatsuki member and a person who killed innocent shinobi without thinking twice. But, I do not want you doing anything that could interfere with Naruto's training, so just keep an eye on them, and make sure nothing happens. Yes, Lady Tsunade, Kakashi replied lazily. And also, it was around 3 o'clock once Konan and Naruto reached the newly made training grounds. The heat was sweltering as it was the hottest time of the day, but that didn't really matter to the Leaf Village. People from Konoha were used to the heat and were still as adamant to continue building their village. Once Naruto showed her to the place he usually trains, she had to stop for a minute to take a breath, laying her weight on a new practice log by her arm. Just coming from the hospital the very same day, and doing something like this was risky, but she felt like she had no choice. They would never get anything done in time if she didn't try to pack as much as needed into the lesson. Naruto looked at her anxiously for a few seconds before he grew impatient. Finally, after waiting a little longer, her spoke up, "Well, what are we going to learn?" Conan gazed at the boy before a frown took her face again. "Patience is a virtue. That is what usually gets shinobi killed, is the recklessness that comes from eagerness. You should know that. Anyway, while you are standing there doing nothing, activate your Rinnegan." Naruto grumbled at the order he received from the blue-haired Jonin and reluctantly activated his Rinnegan in front of her, displaying 2 purple rings on each iris. That is when she pushed herself off of the log and walked over to Naruto, stopping about 10 feet away. "Okay, Naruto-san. Right now, I am your superior. I have listened, watched, and helped Nagato create and perfect his jutsu and skills, so listen closely, because I will only say this once," Conan stated, gaining the full attention of the only blonde there. "Now that you have acquired the Rinnegan, there are certain abilities that have been added to your skill repertoire. It also means you have gained an upper hand in learning new jutsu, as they will somehow become easier for you to learn." Naruto listened intently as the young woman continued. "I am sure you are aware of the Bansho Tenin and the Shinra Tensei from your fight with Nagato's Diva Path?" Conan asked before she received an agreement from Naruto. "Well, those 2 techniques come with the Kekkei Genkai, just like, in example, how the Manjikyu Sharingan comes with the ability of Amaterasu." Naruto did not know what that was, and held his question about Amaterasu until later, because he didn't want to interrupt the woman. "Both moves are able to control the gravity that keeps us on the ground," Conan continues. "To go more in depth, Bansho Tenin is the ability to pull any object towards you at your own free will, by channeling your chakra through your hands. The chakra that is in your hands compresses until it creates its own gravity field in a small circumference inside your palm. The compression is so compact that it is generally invisible to the naked eye, which explains why you can't see it. This compression phase is also the reason why there is a 5-second window in both techniques. Anyway, wherever you point your hand, while doing this attack, it will automatically be tugged to the source of the force. Depending on how much chakra you compress, the farther or heavier the object you can pull towards you." "Oh, okay," Naruto replied with a sense of unusual understanding. Shinra Tensei, on the other hand, is similar to the Bansho Tenin, except it repels anything by gravity using the controlled chakra from your hands. To do this, you need to pressurize the gravity compression from Bansho Tenin to a degree to where it becomes unstable. That is when the gravity becomes unbalanced in your palm, and it erupts into an explosion, causing a gravity expulsion away from your palm. She gave hand gestures to further explain the process. To do this move requires chakra control in the entire body, as it could prove fatal if your chakra explodes without synchronization. Your body has to be in sync for the impact of the expulsion to not affect it. Also, in order to do the full Shinra Tensei, you have to cast both arms outward and expel gravity from both hands simultaneously. If done correctly, it will create a barrier of disrupted gravity around your body, completely shielding you from any attack, just like what the Diva Path used. Conan let Naruto sink that information in for a second before she continued. She was surprised at his level of awareness, but quickly realized that his Rinnegan was activated, so she shrugged it off with indifference. "Now, we shall give you a little practice," the Jonin replied, while picking up a random stick off of the ground. It was about a foot long, 1 centimeter in diameter, and weighed no more than an ounce or 2. She then threw the stick about 30 feet away from Naruto, who watched in interest. "Now, since you already have a jutsu that is similar to this technique in a way, it will make things a little easier. What I want you to do is hold out your hand, aim it at the stick, and concentrate. Imagine your chakra as if you were making a Rasengan without making one, but keep compressing it in your hand until you can't see it. Then, once you do that, concentrate on the stick and imagine it coming to you." "What?" Naruto asked in a shocked manner. "How am I supposed to do that? It's hard enough to make a Rasengan as it is, so how can I compress the chakra into nothing?" "Just think," Conan replied in a nonchalant tone, "you have the Rinnegan, so it shouldn't be that hard." The Jinchuriki thought for a second before he realized what the woman was talking about. Then, with a simple sigh, he raised his right hand and began to concentrate on the stick. He thought about making the Rasengan and compressed it until it became invisible in his mind. Once he did that, he concentrated hard on the stick, trying to imagine that it was coming to him. A few moments passed, and then a few minutes passed until Naruto realized nothing was happening. "Conan-san, it's not working." Conan looked at him annoyed and spoke. "It worked for Nagato, so I don't see why it shouldn't work for you. It was easy to him. He did it on his first try." "Well, sorry for not being as good as my cousin," Naruto replied heatedly, still holding out his hand. "You think it's just easy to grab something without using your hands? Fine. I will just concentrate on the stick right now, because it is just so easy. He then turned his eyesight to the stick and began sarcastically mimicking the pattern to grab it. That caused the blue-haired woman to shake her head, so I pretend to have a Rasengan and then imagine the stick coming to me. Ha! Like that, a soft pat on his palm interrupted his rant as his gaze faltered to his hand. To his amazement, the stick that he couldn't get just a second ago happened to be a tuck on his right hand like super glue. What the? How see? Easy, Conan replied with a self-satisfying stare. But why couldn't I grab it just a second ago? The blonde asked in befuddlement. You weren't concentrating with your eyes, the Jonin replied with a sigh as the stick fell from Naruto's hand. You were concentrating with your mind. The Rinnegan is what makes the stick move, not your mind. Oh, well, why didn't you say that before? The boy asked, irritated, because he looked like an idiot. Conan scoffed at him. I thought you already knew that. Either way, let's try it again, so you get the idea of how the move works. Naruto grumbled more to himself as the paper user picked up the same stick and threw it 100 yards, making its way into the forest. Now, Conan began, you will use the same move you did previously, but at a farther distance away. Concentrate with your eyes and aim your hand to the direction I threw the stick. All right, the Jinchuriki replied as he began to concentrate on the piece of wood. His arm aimed at the stick, intently waiting on its arrival. His concentration made him lose his awareness as he only thought of bringing the stick into his grasp. It was as if it was just him, and the wood he was trying to grab was there. After another moment, right before he was about to give up, a shuffle of leaves attracted his attention, and something shot out of the woods as fast as a bullet. It came straight at Naruto, whose surprise was short-lived as the stick came to his hand and abruptly stopped, encountering resistance. Once again, it wasn't as hard as he thought it was. It's almost as if the Rinnegan tells him how much chakra to use, Conan thought quietly, while she watched Naruto laugh in excitement. It was roughly 6 o'clock in the evening when Naruto and Conan decided to call it a day. She was training herself rather lightly in her jutsu, while simultaneously helping Naruto refine his stick-grabbing skills, and eventually moved it up to logs roughly 6 inches in diameter and 2 feet long. Conan was impressed, while unimpressed at the same time. She knew the Rinnegan helped the user master any type of jutsu, but she didn't really think it was also easier to master the gravity moves. He seemed to get the idea pretty quickly, and it didn't even seem like he was tired. That moves consumes a pretty good bit of chakra, and he has been doing it for the last 3 hours. But then she thought about the boy's chakra and ignored her amazement upon the fact. While walking away from the training grounds, Naruto heard a low growl from his stomach and laughed with a wry smile. Well, I'm hungry now. Ha ha. Conan-sen? Do you want to get something to eat? Conan glanced at him, a little interested in his request. I guess I am famished as well. I don't know anything about this place, so you should show the way. Naruto nodded with a slight smile. There's only one place I know where you won't be rejected from. That statement caused her to drop her head a bit. She just remembered that the village hates her. The only problem with this was the fact that she couldn't escape the situation. There was no way out, and it almost scared her. Strange, why does that scare me? She asked herself in silence. She hasn't been scared of anything since she was a kid, and now the feelings roared its way to the surface, even if it was miniature in her state of mind. Don't worry about it, Conan-san, Naruto told her, which brought her head up in confusion. Did Naruto know what she was thinking? They are nice people and I don't think they will judge you as quickly as you think they will. Conan widened her eyes about Naruto's reply. No, it wasn't what she was thinking, but it did make her feel a little happier once she realized there was still one person around who didn't loathe her. A slight smile overcame her face, knowing that, in a way, she still had a tight Nagato. All right, Naruto-san. It had taken a few minutes to reach the building. It was none other than the famous Ichiraku ramen stand that Naruto had grown accustomed to going to on a daily basis. They had just opened up today and Naruto was getting rather tired of cup ramen. Sure, he ate a little of the homemade foods that stacked in his home, but most of it couldn't fit in his refrigerator, so he had to throw the rest out. Once he pulled over the flap to let himself inside, a young woman greeted him with a cheerful voice. Oh, hey, Naruto. It looks like you received our message today. Welcome to the new and improved Ichiraku. Naruto grinned at her response and looked around the store and noticed things completely redecorated. It carried the traditional counter seats that people ate from, but everything from the back looked as if it cost a lot of money. New fryers, stoves, and other hardware to cook were littered all over the back of the restaurant. It made Naruto a little happy for the Ichirakus. Thanks, Iyama-chan, Naruto beamed to the young brown-haired woman. I have someone with me today, so you can put their order on my tab. That's a first, Iyama replied cheekily, laying her arms on the counter. Who is it? Are you actually going on a date? Naruto blushed about that statement and rubbed the back of his neck. Nah. Nothing like that. She's just a friend of mine. So, it is a girl. Well, where is she? The young Ichiraku asked the blonde anxiously. I want to know who you brought with you. Okay, well, I will bring her in then, Naruto replied before motioning his hand, signaling the other person can enter. Naruto opened a flap for the blue-haired woman who entered with caution. Conan looked at the brown-haired woman who looked into her eyes as well. It was sort of nerve-grueling, because the paper user did not know whether or not to speak. She was unsure if what Naruto said was true, about how the stand would not discriminate. Ayama gazed at her, until finally, a happy smile overtook her features. Hello, welcome to Ichiraku Ramen. Conan stopped for a brief minute for surprise to subside, before she returned the greeting, and sat down on a stool. Thank you, I will be glad to eat here. Two other people in the stand noticed the paper user's presence and left with a rain check, going out with a look of contempt upon their faces when they looked in the paper user's direction. That didn't go unnoticed by her nor the blonde Jinchuriki. Did I hear Naruto come in? An older voice called from the back to Ayama. An aged man walked into the front of the store carrying a towel, wiping his hands thoroughly. His hair grayed with age and an apron wrapped on his body. It was none other than Teuchi Ichiraku. His face lit up in delight once he saw the young blonde sitting on a stool with a foxy grin. So it is you. Been a while, hasn't it? Teuchi asked the Jinchuriki with warmth. It sure has, and you know what I want. Naruto replied with an enormous smile plastered on his face. Yeah, the usual. The older man replied with a similar smirk, until he noticed the other presence in the room. And who is this pretty young woman? You flatter me saying such things, but my name is Conan, the blue-haired Jonin replied with a slight smile at the end of her lips. Well, that's a lovely name, the older man replied with sweetness, and what will you be having? Conan didn't really know what to eat. She wasn't a big fan of ramen for personal reasons, but she couldn't decline Naruto's offer. Plus, on top of that, this was really the only place she could go to eat without having to worry about discrimination so far. Earlier, when they were walking to the ramen stand, they both passed a few restaurants with people inside who noticed the blue-haired woman walking by, and the managers of the restaurant passed evil glares toward her direction. They were stares of killer intent. They meant that she could not go there, and the owners were not willing to negotiate. Breaking from her ruminations, the Jonin looked up with concern before it disappeared in a flash. I would like today's special, please. Coming right up. Ayama, you know the drill. Teuchi replied with a smile. Yes sir, right away, the young Ichiraku replied, before going to the back and preparing the food. Teuchi looked at the two ninja before him and replied, your food will be ready shortly. Thanks. I'm starved, Naruto replied before the older man returned to the back and helped his daughter. Things got quiet for a minute as no one talked or brought up anything. Naruto and Conan were sort of in their own little worlds, reflecting on the past and wondering about the future. It wasn't until Naruto decided to say something that made tension fall from the little stand. So, you are a wind nature too? That response seemed to stop Conan's reflecting, and she turned to eye him. How could you guess that? Well, Naruto started again. I saw you practicing your origami attacks while I was working on Bansho Tenon, and I noticed that all of your techniques have wind attributes. I never really knew that about you. Yes, while you did not see the full extent of my power, because of my condition, I do indeed carry the Fuetan affinity. Although, I am surprised you would bring up something like that, Conan replied calmly, averting her attention back to the counter. Naruto didn't really have to think twice about that statement. I brought it up because I have the Fuetan nature too. You do? The blue-haired woman asked in a bit of shock. Naruto looked at her a little puzzled and lowered his voice to a whisper. You didn't know? I thought all Akatsuki knew about their enemy? While that may be true, Conan replied, shifting her eyes back to the counter, information came rather slowly in our organization. I think the only time we actually found out about your affinity was when you fought Nagato's diva path. Heh. I guess that's why I still overpowered Nagato, Naruto replied with a foxy grin. Possibly, but I do have one question, the paper user brought up. How does the Rasen Shuriken work? I heard Nagato commenting about it while you were fighting his diva path. He said something about it involving wind, and it seemed to annoy him, so it must have been a rather powerful jutsu. Well, it is a jutsu I worked on while I was in Mount Myoboku, Naruto began while gaining the interest of the woman to his right. Basically, I create a Rasengan with another clone helping me mold the chakra. Then afterwards, I begin using my wind nature to encase the Rasengan with wind chakra. Once I do that, I push more wind chakra into the move until the wind blades start increasing in size and rotation. Then once it's ready, I just throw it and watch the fireworks. That sounds complicated and difficult, Conan replied with an odd look of awe. Naruto smiled at her again. Yeah, I mean, I trained a very long time to do that, but the move is still not perfected though. What do you mean not perfected? That seems like a move all to its own. How can something that strong not be completed? Conan replied with a look of irritation. Well, the blonde spoke after a few seconds of thinking. Before I left the hospital for my checkup after my fight with Nagato, they did a scan on me and told me that every time I do that move, it affects my cells to a point where I lose a day of my life every time I use it. It's sort of an issue with that technique. Conan sunk her head a little low after hearing that. It seemed the lifespan problem was universal to every shinobi. It only made her think of her friend even more than she wanted to. I believe you can do it, the blue-haired woman replied hoarsely. Huh? Naruto replied. He could barely make out what she said. I really think you can achieve that feat, Conan replied louder with confidence. You have such a huge advantage already by bearing the Rinnegan. If anything, I want to help you with your attack if I can. Naruto thought about it for a second. Another moment passed by before a grin crept across his face. Sure. I'd like that. And who knows, maybe I will teach you how to use it. It was really confusing to Conan now. Naruto seemed to really trust her for him to explain how to do a move like that, and even offered to teach it to her no less. But to have someone put full trust in her in only 6 days after their original encounter was a little strange. It was almost like a role reversal with someone she once knew. I knew you'd be here, a voice replied out of nowhere. Naruto turned to look at who was talking, and saw a silver-haired, mask-bearing Jonin behind him. Kakashi-sensei? What are you doing here? What? Can't I just drop by to say hey to a student of mine? Kakashi replied innocently looking at the blonde. Naruto glared unsatisfied at the Jonin, but you already met me today, so this time has to be something else. Kakashi looked over to the Jinchuriki and wandered his eye over to Conan, who was looking back at him with interest on her face. They seemed to be doing fine. Nothing unusual. So, this is the new recruit? I'm assuming you already know my name, and I already know yours, so no reason for introductions is there? He replied with a masked smile. I guess not, but would prefer if we reintroduced ourselves, now that we are on the same footing, the blue-haired woman replied with nonchalance. Kakashi changed his look of happy into interest as he saw Conan reach her hand out in a greeting gesture. Hello, my name is Conan, and I am a Leaf Jonin. What is yours? The silver-haired man looked at her hand for a second, before he let out a smile, and grabbed her hand with a friendly handshake. My name is Kakashi. Nice to meet you, Conan of the Leaf. I think we will get along just fine. Just as long as you don't get any funny ideas. So Kakashi-sensei, why are you here? Naruto asked, clearly annoyed by the man's disregard of the blonde's question earlier. Huh? Kakashi replied in confusion, I thought I already told you. I like to visit my stew. That's a load of crap and you know it. Naruto screamed with self-righteousness. Kakashi thought for a second, shifting his body position from one leg to the other, then let out a nice smile. It's the truth. If I came here for anything important, you would be the first to know. Well, Naruto replied in defeat, all right. It was nice to see you too, I guess. That wasn't so hard, was it? Kakashi replied with a smile in his eye. Now, I have things to attend to, so I will have to talk to you later. He then looked over to the blue-haired woman and gave her a nice smile as well. Later, Conan of the Leaf. And with that, he started walking away from the two, lifting the flap over his head. He abruptly stopped after the flap left his silver hair and poked his head back in between the flaps. Oh, by the way, both of you are to live together in Naruto's flat. Tsunada's orders. Kakashi then did a shunshin, leaving the couple alone in the restaurant. There was an absolute silence that encased the whole stand, leaving nothing to make a sound. All right guys. Naruto's usual and today's special. Aoyama replied, placing their orders on the counter with a smile. The brown-haired girl opened her eyes shortly after and looked at both of the statue-esque figures standing in the lone stand. Hello?
End of chapter 5.